Well, welcome to the Black Isle, Dingwall and Seaforth Committee. And please note that this meeting will be recorded for future viewing for public access via the Council's internet site. I'd like to welcome the press who will be listening in for the first time. Welcome, press, if you're there. If any member loses connection or there's any technical issues during this meeting, support will be available from the ICT officer. And please ensure that your cameras, members' cameras and their microphones are switched on. The microphones are muted during, unless they're actually talking. I think we go on to the calling of the roll. Could I ask the roll to be called, please?
Good morning. If you can just let me know when if you're here. Councillor Adam.
Here.
Councillor Barclay doesn't appear to be
Councillor
here.
Barclay's having difficulties getting on to Teams, but she's continuing to try.
Right. Councillor McKinnon.
Yep.
Councillor McLean.
Present.
And Councillor Patterson.
Present, thank you.
And do we have apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Fraser and Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much indeed. Any declarations of interest?
Yes, Chair.
Yes,
I have a declaration of interest in item 8, the Highland Coastal Communities Fund, as co-founder for an organic fish farm in the northeast of Skye. We obviously produce funds for that, so having taken legal advice, I will not participate in this item. I will switch my camera off and I will listen into the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Yes, there have been some difficulties in getting onto Teams. I had difficulties myself, so I hope that Councillor Barclay will join us shortly. But I think we should just press on. Can we go to the police area performance report, and like to welcome Chief Inspector Wilson, who's here to give a summary. Jamie.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I'll start off by introducing Richard Ross. I think this is the first time that you'll have seen Richard at this forum. So he is the new inspector based in Dingwall. He has replaced Kevin McLeod, who's inspector there for, I think, just over 2.5 years. Kevin is on secondment. He's part of Op Uram. So he'll be part of the planning team for that, and that secondment is due to last for 7 months. Although there is a chance that Kevin might not return as he moves on to something else. But Richard's very much taken the stance that he'll be here permanently as the inspector for Dingwall, and he's settling in very well to the team. And I would say that we are certainly feeling his impact from the experiences that he's gained throughout his career. He's got 25 years service. He's transferred here from a CID position as a DI within the Public Protection Unit, and has experience working across North Highland and elsewhere, and also as a supervisor and manager within support roles for the division. So he's got a good corporate understanding of how the organisation works. So moving into the report itself, I won't insult your intelligence by reading over a lot of the print that's summarised at the top for each priority, and I'll just move into the highlighted, or what I see as highlights for you. So there have been no fatal accidents within this area during the past 12 months, but the number of people detected for drink and drive offences has increased from 16 to 39. I'm not massively concerned by that because we have trained or increased the number of officers which are trained to use the new drug detection kits. So there's different charges for drink driving and drug driving. We didn't have the same capacity to detect drug offences as we do now. There are swabs which are kitted within vehicles so that officers can test people who they suspect may have consumed or injected some kind of controlled substance. And I believe that's the reason for the increase. I do expect that figure to level off because the figure that we've got at the moment will set the standard, if you like, and next year the figures will level off, and unless we have a massive influx of drugs or people who choose to follow that kind of path in life, then it should stabilise. The number of people detected for speeding has increased from 159 to 196. I am surprised by that. I didn't expect that, just based on the restrictions that have been in place. A lot of the other areas within North Highland have seen reductions, so not quite sure why that is. Although you do have some routes which are given a significant amount of attention by roads policing and also your local policing units, but we'll monitor that as well. I don't intend to dwell on your mobile phone offences or your seatbelt offences, and there is a summary there which outlines the priorities in terms of Operation Cedar. Sorry, will I stop here for questions, or do you want me to go through the whole document?
Perhaps we could have a couple of questions. There are two councillors who've indicated they'd like to speak. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to say a very warm welcome to Richard Ross. It's happy to see you, and I hope you'll enjoy your stay in Dingwall. Well, it's a very good report. And you're answering the questions as you're going along, which is really good. But I was very surprised at the amount of speeding, going up to 37, the 37 up from 2019-20. I just can't understand that, because, you know, with all the 20 miles an hour, etc., that are in the places, you wouldn't think they'd think of speeding. And I wondered if you had any complaints about the 20 miles an hour speeding restriction in Dingwall, because I've had lots of complaints, and I just wondered, you know, if the public had thought, well, I'm going to complain to the police. So it would be good to know that. The drug seizures, that's good that you've got results, but we keep hearing about them, and you know, I wonder how we find out. Like, people will phone you up and say this house is dealing in drugs, and it's very difficult for us. So, you know, and you say to them, well, phone the police. So I wonder, is there a high number of the public that actually do phone you? So that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, in terms of the 20 miles per hour speed limit, I can't say we're receiving a lot of complaints about it. But what I would say is that people are not complying with it. Like, my office overlooks the new traffic speed reducing measures which have been placed outside Dingwall Police Station, and there are still people speeding. So it's quite often that I'll phone down to the sergeant and ask him to have 2 officers outside with a speed gun. And I know that Donnie McKinnon, who is the roads policing inspector, has picked up on that as well. And at the end of last week, I noticed that the council have applied the 2 strips of speed measurement wires across the road, because there must be complaints going into the council about it, that people are still speeding. So they're doing some analytical work around that. I expect we're going to have to do something there, because as I say, every day I'm still seeing people travelling in excess of 20, 30 and possibly higher outside my office, and I'm trying my best to combat that. But there is, personally, I feel there's a bit more work to be done. The second part, you asked about the drug, like, you know, there are other sections in the report, the crime section of the report, which I intended to speak about drugs in a bit more detail. But yes, people do report drug dealing to us, drug offences to us, and it is summarised in the report there. But when the information comes in, whether that's reported through 101 or by letter or by the Police Scotland Contact Us facility or Crime Stoppers, that information is collated at a central point by our intelligence unit. It's qualified in terms of its credibility, and then it's assessed. And every time we reach the threshold to execute, where there is sufficient evidence to execute a warrant in relation to an address or an offender, that takes place. We obviously have to go through the process of applying to a sheriff for them to make the decision whether there's credible and sufficient evidence to, you know, effectively, if need be, smash somebody's front door in, because we need to get in quickly. So you've got to be proportionate with that. And there's a lot of concerns around risk assessments, because there could be children within the address, dogs and vulnerable people. So, but in answer to your question, yes, please ask your constituents to continue to report every piece of information that they have relative to misuse of drugs and drug dealing, either by the 101 or by Crime Stoppers or by the Contact Us facility, and we'll pursue it as best we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank
indeed.
you very much.
Councillor McKinnon, is your question about what Chief Inspector has already discussed, or would you prefer to ask it later?
All I was going to say was to welcome Richard as well. We spoke briefly this morning. Thank you, Jamie, for the report. Just one thing I would like to say is I'm really, really pleased that the officers now have had training, and there is an increase in the detection, especially in the drugs and related to driving. It is extremely worrying that there's an increase, especially that period when there's supposed to be a lockdown as well. So you'd have expected less cars on the road. But it's encouraging that you are being proactive in relation to that. And like my fellow members will confirm as well, we always encourage our constituents to contact you, no matter how weak they think is. The more people that phone and let you know what's going on, whether it be directly to your officers or through 101 or whatever, I think that can only be positive, as well as we work together to try to eradicate the blights that drugs and criminal behaviour comes upon the individuals in our wards. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor. Like, we couldn't operate if it wasn't for people reporting matters to us. You know, if the public ceased to engage, we would no longer be able to function. Sorry, I'll just provide a bit more information about the drug procedure. So I don't think I explained it very well to begin with. You're sitting with 39 at the moment. That's with all of our staff trained. They are newly trained. So in the next reporting period, we won't be training any more people. We feel like we've trained a sufficient number of people. So I would anticipate that you should, and this is where I will need to determine whether what further work needs to be done. But I would anticipate you should come back with the same sort of figure, because our proactivity will remain the same, and that has been high. We're obviously fighting through education, prevention and intervention and enforcement to try and reduce that figure. But that is really our this is the first time those figures have been released since the training, if you like, for us really to have a flavour. It's our control sample. That's what I'm looking for. Okay.
Thanks very much indeed. And let me also add my welcome to Richard Ross. We've met, I think, last week when we had a meeting about traffic and other arrangements to be put in place on the Black Isle because of our expected upsurge in tourists. But welcome to this committee, Richard. Good to see you here. Jamie, can I suggest you just continue with the rest of your report, and then we'll take other questions at the end.
That'd be great. Okay, so moving on to like the Operation Cedar summary is there for you to read. I don't think that's changed drastically since the last committee meeting. The driver engagement north, just to summarise, that's a multi-agency initiative which makes use of interactive driving simulator designed to assess and highlight a participant's reactions. It's like a computer simulator, identifies or creates hazards on the roads. It's aimed to raise hazard awareness and identify any potential vulnerabilities people may have when they're driving. So we advertise where this where driving engagement north is going to be promoted. So it's been promoted at supermarkets and other public hubs. The link is attached to the document there, Highlands and Islands Driver Engagement, scotland.pnn.police.uk. I think that illustrates where the next engagement events will take place. They may not be there yet because they stopped, obviously, as a result of the restrictions, but those will be being applied in the near future. It's also a great place where if you have concerns about a resident, a friend, associate who's maybe deteriorating in terms of eyesight or reaction time, stuff like that, through age or something else, you could take them along, they could go through the simulation, and they will get that kind of specialist assessment in terms of their ability to drive. So I would highly recommend it. I also wanted to say that eyesight tests, if you're involved in an accident or there's any kind of dubiety in terms of the standard of your eyesight when you're stopped by the police, eyesight tests are now being carried out because we've seen a number of incidents, some quite significant incidents, where one of the causation factors, we believe, to an accident has been because of deteriorating eyesight and people shouldn't have been driving. So when people are stopped now following an accident, it's par for the course that your eyesight will be tested by the roads policing officers. North Coast 500 and visitor management, we have got roads policing plans in place. From a roads policing perspective, a traffic, as they were formerly called, traffic police perspective, they have a plan in place, and each of the community policing teams under my line management within North Highland all have policing plans in place for the North Coast 500 visitor management in general. So we've created those operational plans based on what we learned last year, the challenges that we faced last year, what's been reported to us and what is predicted for this year, and we've tried to work in parallel with that by providing an appropriate response by committing staff to North Coast 500 and also this patrol plan around the problematic areas, challenging areas that we saw last year. It's no secret that the demand on the police and other organisations is going to increase quite significantly from today. I have no doubt. I'm curious to see how many camper vans I see on the road when I drive from Dingwall to Dornoch tonight. But the wheel's not going to stop turning in terms of the other demands on the police in terms of antisocial behaviour, drugs, other routine roads policing work, crime, and other critical incidents and missing people that occasionally come in. So we're going to be pretty busy, that is for sure. The plans have been designed to try and prepare ourselves for that in advance. And also I should highlight that based on the pain we experienced last year, we set up the North Highland Visitor Management Group, which is, I think it's its fourth week, Richard, on Thursday, is it? Fourth meeting on Thursday. We set that up, but it's been handed over to ward managers to chair as of last week. But there's a good structure in place, and the purpose of that is so that we could share our challenges, also maintain regular contact with each of the stakeholders that are involved in visitor management and North Coast 500 issues. So we meet every Thursday. Each partner provides an update, a status update, a sit rep, if you like, in terms of the challenges they faced or they foresee. And there's an opportunity to for us to make plans to counter any issues. The representation around the table is very good. We'll have the fire service, environmental health, ambulance service, ward manager chairs it, as I say. We have various members of the Ranger Service, Nature Scotland, and others. Coast Guard also attend. We've got everybody that we feel may be able to help in advance of the real issues that we'll probably face. Yes, so that's it in terms of visitor management at the moment. I'll take questions at the end, obviously. In terms of serious and organised crime, I think I've summarised what I really wanted to speak about from an area command perspective in relation to drugs. So I won't dwell on that, but there have been 9 search warrants executed within Black Isle, Dingwall and the Seaforth area, 8 of which were positive, which is outstanding. In terms of acquisitive crime, your housebreaking figures have remained fairly static. I'll just put context on that. The break-ins to dwelling houses is not like your people panic when they see these figures and think we've got burglars breaking into good people's homes. There's not a lot of that happening, and more often than not, it's just because of the crimes that we have, because the essential elements have been completed. They're listed as house break-ins, but a lot of the time, and I can attribute most to these to people who have an unsavoury lifestyle, more often than not stealing from each other. Not that makes it right, far from it, but I just don't want people thinking that we'll have people dressed up in black and white stripy tops breaking into houses overnight. Your shoplifting figures are acceptable. Theft of motor vehicles, you're sitting at 5. A lot of these have been where they're classed probably more appropriately as unlawful removal, where people have taken or a person has taken somebody else's car without their permission. We don't have, I can't think of, Richard will correct me if I'm wrong, any vehicles which have been stolen and then removed from the area and we haven't recovered it, you know, like we experienced in the 80s with fast Fords and that type of thing, which were being sold and taken into the Central Belt. I don't think that's an issue for us. Moving into antisocial behaviour, violence and disorder, licensed premises checks, obviously you'll see a dip from 564 to 319. That's for obvious reasons. All the pubs were closed. They open as of today. So as part of that visitor management plan, all of the inspectors have taken it away to put structure around licensed premises checks with the routine. They need to be thorough. We'll be setting our stall out very early. If we don't, then you know, we'll suffer for it. So I expect to see an increase on the next report that's produced for you in terms of the number of licensed premises checks. Your drugs offences is static. I remain unconcerned by that. Breaches of the peace has increased to 76 from 64, so a bit of an increase. I think that's probably attributed to boredom, a bit of antisocial behaviour within houses where people have been charged. The number of assaults on emergency workers is sitting at 15. I did present another committee this morning and elaborated that the number of assaults on emergency workers across Scotland has increased quite significantly, and in certain areas of North Highland, particularly Caithness, it has risen. As a consequence, the Chief Constable has made a pledge to try and reduce that through debriefs and welfare support for officers, and also addressing any learning points after each incident. So what we do is, if there is an incident where an officer has been assaulted, the managers, particularly the inspector, Richard, will review that after the sergeant's review. Sergeant will confirm that they've covered all the bases, addressed learning points, as I say, covered the welfare points. Richard will quality assure that and then confirm to me that that's all done, which is then fed back as high as our senior management team at headquarters. So we're quite serious about that because it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for anybody to experience violence within the workplace, but no different for police officers, in my opinion. Incidents of vandalism are down by 44, which is good. You have 10 premises which have been monitored by Operation Notebook. So that's addresses where we've had calls of antisocial behaviour. In order for an address to meet that threshold, we need to have received 3 calls relating to a specific address in any particular month, and then we monitor it to make sure it doesn't happen again. We step in and we take there's interventionary measures applied. That usually involves, first of all, a visit between a housing officer and a police officer to tell them that that we've noticed the increase in antisocial behaviour and it's unacceptable, and we explain the escalation procedures which are applied jointly with housing. The violence, disorder and antisocial behaviour, your stop search numbers have reduced, but that's because it's not been proportionate for us to stop and search people, because there's not been the same number of people on the street due to lockdown. Moving on to page 7, hate crime. There was Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary completed a review / audit of all hate crimes. I was involved in that. I was interviewed by them in terms of my perspective of how we deal with hate crimes and the extent of the issue within Highland. It's not a massive issue for us up here. We do see it from time to time, but there's no pattern to it. It seems to be individual isolated incidents. We've had 114 reports of missing people in North Highland. Missing people has up until now has not been as big a drain on resources as it was the previous year, again due to COVID. There are times where it can be massively draining on resources for high risk missing people, especially with suicidal ideations. We haven't had a huge amount of that recently. I hope that continues. In terms of children's homes and the residents there going missing, we maintain routine contact with the children's homes. Whenever we start to see a pattern in terms of absconding or offending behaviour, we liaise with them through a single point of contact within the police, and if need be, it's escalated to Richard to have a frank discussion if we feel that there's maybe more that needs to be done. I'm being no means critical of the management of the homes, but they might need our support because of a particularly unruly child. And the last sections are fairly standard. So that was the main points that I picked out, and I could take any questions.
Many thanks indeed, Jamie. That was a very useful report and a helpful summary. A couple of members want to come in. Before they do, can I just ask you a bit about the visitor management group that you've established? Obviously, tourism is a major priority for the council. And the chief executive said last week at the tourism committee that if there's a need for resources, extra resources, she would try and find them. So I'm just wondering, on the basis of what you saw last year, the kind of pressures you expected to see and would address in your group this year. What's the kind of thing that you think you might have to react to?
Yeah, congestion in areas which can't take a high volume of vehicles is one thing. Human waste disposal in appropriate locations, other waste management issues. We can see. So there's an echo.
Right.
We've had like the social distancing and the number of people that could congregate. The figures haven't changed, or the figures are there for people to see, and we'll need people to comply with that. I expect that we're going to receive quite a significant number of calls because people are not complying with that, as we saw last year, and that could be anywhere on the North Coast 500 route, obviously, and elsewhere, where we don't have an abundance of resources stationed. So hence the reason for our deployment plan around the North Coast 500 route, along with RPU, so that we could promote or increase our response times by having vehicles around that route as routinely as we possibly can. The Ranger Service have managed to, or they were interviewing for 10 new Rangers, which are going to be across Highland. And I'm told that already they're thinking of increasing that to 17. So even if we say 10, that's 10 that we didn't have last year. There were other rangers based within the parks last year, but that's 10 dedicated members of staff. And the ranger manager, Philip, whose surname escapes me, he's involved in the visitor management group, very actively involved in the visitor management group, and we have reinforced our lines of communication with them. So when we are faced with issues similar to what we were faced last year, Philip can call me, I could call Philip, and we could promote the chances of a swift resolution to any issues. We didn't have that close bond last year. I guess we were taken by surprise a little bit, excuse me. But there is that, we do have that unification between each of the different organisations, so we could just pick up the phone. And there's going to be occasions where we can't respond because, as I said at the beginning there, we don't have any extra police officers, and the demand is going to increase on the police. But you know, my idea is we'll work as one single unified group, as I say, to deal with the issues collectively. We could separate out the responsibilities as we deal with the issue. But there will be times where the police are carrying out the role of environmental health because environmental health are unable to attend, and we want to help, and vice versa. I expect that will happen.
Thanks very much indeed. Yes, I can confirm that I think 17 rangers are being recruited. It's good to know that you've got this line of contact with Phil Waite and others. That really is very helpful and good to know. Well, we can't provide you with any more police officers, but hopefully we might be able to provide you with a few council workers who will be able to help you with pinch points. Thanks very much indeed. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. And I know there's a lot of information in the report, and you've highlighted where some of the numbers have gone down. It's due to COVID, so you will be concerned that there's going to be a big increase with everything opening up again. I think what I'd like to highlight is on page 6, where you talk about prevention and intervention activity, and where you say that communities have, you know, COVID's brought out the best in communities, as well as, you know, some of the issues that you raise in the report, and that many of the population have worked well in, you know, supporting vulnerable people within the community. I had highlighted speeding as well. It seems to be that there is a big increase. I see it every day going through my communities. That the 20 mile an hour, people seem to think is only when school's in, and they don't seem to think it's all year, you know, all year round and all day. Drug increases. I mean, the members were out last week in Dingwall in one area, and I'm sure Alistair will go on to talk about what was highlighted to him by a member of the public. And I wondered to where it talks about the 114 on page 9, the 114 reports on missing persons. You do talk about the residential units and looked after children, but I wondered how many are older people as well. There's a lot of people with dementia or other illnesses that maybe are out, and the police then have to go in and try and find them. And there's a brief mention of Highland champs being in Clachnahary, but I know Dingwall Academy do a lot to support that as well, and they've got a beautiful mural that was done a couple of years ago. And fraud, you touched on online electronic fraud, and you mentioned there's been an increase in that, and I know personally of an incident that's happened that involved somebody that was on Facebook, and you know, it's really horrible what people can do. You know, people trust that the information that they're getting is right, and for people to defraud them, individuals to defraud them of their money is really terrible. But I wondered if you could highlight on that. Maybe you say there's a few different ways that people have lost money, as well as charities and business. Could you give us some examples of, or you know, without going into detail, of some of the ways that that this is being done, just to highlight people, because there's a lot more of it being highlighted generally, that especially due to COVID, people are, because they're not out more, they're doing more things online. And my last question was about antisocial behaviour, and I wonder, do you keep statistics if it's, because sometimes when it's antisocial behaviour, once we make a complaint or there's a lot of complaints, the individual may be moved to a different area or a different town or village, and then it's just different officers, so then having to deal with that antisocial behaviour. Might be different housing officers or different police officers when we move them around areas. And it was just to see, because really what they're needing is added support, which isn't just police support, but support from social workers, housing and NHS. So I just wondered if you could highlight anything there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the frauds, yeah, we're seeing frauds every day. It's funny you raise it because we spoke about it this morning in a bit of detail. There is no doubt that it is widespread, and there are people who are receiving calls, including myself, receiving calls, receiving text messages, receiving emails purporting to be from PayPal, their own bank, whatever. And I think the example this morning was somebody who had been contacted by a person purporting to be from the delivery company Hermes, saying that they needed to pay them a certain amount of money because they'd missed a delivery, and that turned out to be fraudulent. That's a new one on me. So there's one example. But yeah, people being contacted by phone, purporting to be from their own bank, and then managing to convince the victim over the phone, without having any details, to transfer funds into another account. We're seeing that happening, and that's probably the most frequent one. So there's a lot of work that is carried out nationally and also locally. Our preventions and we have a preventions and interventions and partnership, it's actually PIP, that look to identify individual incidents, scrutinised incidents that come in for any learning points and any vulnerabilities or any gaps in terms of our response, any opportunities to influence the public to prevent it from happening again. So Jenny Bond, the sergeant there, is on that every day, and we keep pumping out the public messaging around frauds and how to avoid it. The banks are doing the same, and other organisations which have been involved in this type of fraud. The public messaging is excellent online. I'm not sure how great it is in your traditional printed press, but it is excellent online. Like, I know that whenever I log on to my bank online, I get a message right away saying, by the way, we will not ever contact you and ask you to transfer money. But I do all my banking online. Not everybody does that. So because of the number of calls that are still coming in, and there's not a huge amount of victims, but there's still a huge amount of people who are potential victims. Because of the number of calls coming in, what I suggested this morning was that I think it would maybe be worthwhile a member of our prevention, interventions and partnerships team being involved in each of the community councils, and I'm saying North Highland because that's the area I manage, but given a short briefing on what the different types of frauds there are and how to avoid those, and for, obviously each community council within their sphere of influence to broadcast that warning message to try and counter it. So I took that as a task from the ward meeting this morning, and I could do the same for you if you wanted. So that's the fraud side of things. In terms of antisocial behaviour, you spoke about, first of all, do we keep stats? We record every call that comes in, and every call that comes in. If we get a call that comes in for an antisocial, loud music at a specific address, our incident is coded on the system so that it's easily retrievable. So if I wanted to go and if I was doing research around an address to find out how many calls were called to 5 High Street, where Jamie Wilson lives, I could quickly retrieve that data, and then I could filter it down to how many related to antisocial behaviour. I just click the antisocial behaviour tab and it'll tell me. and I could set the date range as well. So we've got all that. In terms of displacing the problem, okay, so we follow the Operation Notebook process, which means you get 3 warnings essentially from various people. The third warning, I think, is if you get a third warning, that is to tell you that the council are considering eviction proceedings. I think Jim Holden's coming in, so Jim could clarify this, but I think that's what it means. And then after that, like throughout these processes, when we attend and respond to these incidents, you spoke about support. If we see a vulnerability, see if we our deliberation is that the family are in dire need of support from social services, or somebody has some kind of addiction, we will always make a referral through the vulnerable persons database. So it's quite clinical. We submit a form, it goes to our concern hub the next morning, and then it's shared. So if it's assessed that education would benefit from understanding what the police were involved in, it's shared with education. If it's deliberation that's worthwhile sharing with social services, likewise. If there's a fire services referral, if it's a vulnerable adult who sets their I don't know, their stew on fire in their kitchen, there's almost a fire, then it'll go to the fire service for them to conduct a fire safety referral. So that hub plays a crucial role. But after stage 3 and the council take it to eviction proceedings, we need to be satisfied that we've invoked all the various support mechanisms. We'll take responsibility for that. But then the council make a decision, and it's informed in consultation with the police and any other relevant stakeholders. There's then a joint decision around where that person should be relocated to. And I get the fact that sometimes it just does displace the problem, but the aim is to provide the right support, their support, and there's enforcement, influence, mediation, whatever there is. The aim is that we apply the package, and the package then achieves the outcome of resolving the issue before the person is evicted. But it doesn't always work out that way. Does that answer that?
Thank you very much indeed. And I think we would welcome your presentation on different kinds of telephone and other online fraud. We could perhaps fix this up for the next area committee meeting. I think that would be useful. It's a real problem, and it always seems to hit those who are most vulnerable hardest, and it's a heck of a problem. Yeah, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jamie, for your report. Just in relation to the drugs and just what Angela mentioned there a few minutes ago, I have had a brief discussion with Richard earlier today, and we're going to touch base next week. And from our ward, it's something that we need to look at, because we're seeing instances in paraphernalia lying at certain areas in our ward, which indicate drug abuse. So it's something that I'm happy to meet up with Richard, and as all members in the ward will want to take part in that, because we were at a meeting last week, and it was 2 o'clock, just the back of 2, and we saw certain individuals well under the influence of drugs, and it was distressing to see in a built-up housing estate as well. So, but we will engage with Inspector Ross with it later. Thank you. Thanks, Jimmy.
Great stuff.
Thank you. Margaret, I can see your hand. Is it an old hand or a new hand?
No, it's not an old hand. It's a new hand. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I think we're all concerned about the drugs. It's really such a distressing worry, and also, you know, antisocial behaviour right across the ward. You know, we had a problem over the weekend, and youngsters breaking into empty houses. Now, this has happened in different areas across our ward, but not to this extent. Youngsters breaking into houses, which causes great concern to the neighbours, because if a fire is lit and it goes out of control, they're living there in fear. And it's not the first time that it's happened to this particular house. And I think Angela's aware of it as well. And there's a huge concern for the safety of the people that live there next door or further down, but also for the youngsters that go in there, because if they're going in there and you know, taking anything, who knows? And that would be just a tragedy. So how do we get the message across to the youngsters that it's not acceptable? Now, I think Hector MacDonald was the policeman that dealt with it, and you know, it's very difficult. But anyway, I've spoken to our officers today, and we've got an officer going out this afternoon, and they're going to make it safe, because obviously they've broken in round the back. It's boarded up at the front, but the concern is that the roof is very, very dangerous, and you know, if they were in there and it fell in, it just does. You just cannot imagine how awful it could be. So how do we get round that? How do we get the message across to them that it's foolhardy and stupid to go into a house that's really in a very bad condition and start, you know, maybe drinking or whatever, or smoking or whatever they're doing? It's very, very dangerous. And, you know, prevention is definitely better than the cure. So I don't know if it's that the police can go to the schools and talk to the youngsters. It is just a very worrying situation. Thank you. Well, and thank you very much for the report, Jamie. It was excellent and thorough.
You're welcome. Do you want me to answer that, Gordon?
Yeah. Angela, do you want to talk about the same thing?
Well, similar, yes. It is a concern, and I know the officers went out and have made some recommendations, but also the weekend before, it happened in Conan Bridge, and the old lodge and Bedintosh house, and they had a fire in it previously. So there's obviously an increase, and my concern, because it's all boarded up again because they pulled all the boarding off, my concern was that if they had another fire in the exact same spot, the children or the young people would have been trapped in that building. You know, so it's really difficult. I don't think they realise how dangerous it is for them as well, and really keep out of buildings, old buildings, and you know, keep safe.
Is yeah, sorry, is that building in Conan Bridge, is that now resecured, is it? And who's it
So
owned
double
by?
checked.
Who's it owned by?
It's owned by Highland Council, so Mark's taking notes, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, like somebody said, prevention is better than the cure. Like, we need to make sure that the security of the building is sufficient to try and prevent them from going back. And I realise that we could never be 100%, but that would be ideal to increase security, and so that we're at least get that level of satisfaction. So what we then do is we need to identify who the people are involved, and if it's kids that are involved in an incident for the first time, more often than not, when we identify them and we'll have a word with them in the presence of their parents, that's the end of it. You don't hear from them again. There are the kids who don't take any notice of our warning, and also parents that don't take any notice of our warning, and then that's when we'll have to go down the children's reporter route in a more robust response. That's really, in terms of enforcement, in terms of our processes, that's what we would do. But we could also, if we identified a pattern, now we would need to, before we could afford to go and put a plan in place to go and speak to every year group, if you like, around the dangers of entering abandoned dwellings or whatever they are, because that's quite costly for us, because you know, we need to be really making the best use of our staff time, particularly at this time. Before we did that, we need to identify whether or not there was a pattern to the offending behaviour. If the same people were involved in both, that already had a warning, that hadn't taken it on board, parents hadn't supported us on that, then we might look at getting that group in front of others who might be able to influence, like your youth support officers within the school, somebody else who we feel like. I always like each set of circumstances is different. I always try to problem solve my way around things. So it might be that they listen to their gym teacher, you know. So have the gym teacher try and support us and have a word with the kids. Yeah, each individual's incident needs to be assessed on its own merits. But if it starts to become a widespread problem involving a group that we might not identify, then yes, we'd be going into the schools and we'll be speaking about that. But if I'll take a look at the two incidents along with Richard from the weekend, and then this the other incident from last weekend. And if we feel it's worth it, we'll make contact with our media officer, and we'll get a message put out on our police pages just warning about the dangers, which could then be recycled by all of the partners and people that follow our pages. So, Richard, can I leave that with you?
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jamie. Mark, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just briefly. So for those that haven't met me, I'm Mark Rogers. I'm the Chief Officer for Housing and Property Services. So sadly for me, if it's a building owned by the council, then eventually it'll land on my desk if there's an issue with it. Just wanted to make the point that if we've got a building which you know to be particularly high risk, you know that there's been issues like this before, then do by all means feel free to email me with a specific detail of it, especially if you've got concerns, either yourself, Richard, or Jamie, and then I can task directly staff to make sure that it is secured, perhaps beyond the normal level of security which just apply to a vacant building. So there's a whole range of things you can do, from Cytex and various different forms of metal to exclude people from buildings. We tend not to do it in every building because it's quite expensive, but I think where we can share that sort of intelligence that there are particular risks, and I have no problem in putting that extra level of security in, and then that will make your job easier and hopefully keep the community satisfied as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you. Before taking your leave, Jamie, I'd like to report to the meeting that I had a meeting with Conrad Trickett, the divisional commander, along with elected members and members of the community, about the safety issues around the Monlochie Junction. It was a useful exchange. I mean, essentially, the community have a very strong desire to extend the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit to beyond the Monlochie Junction from North Keswick. Subsequent to that meeting, Conrad had a meeting with Transport Scotland. That went apparently very well. I have sent a note back to Conrad reflecting the concerns of the community, but all the community councils in the Black Isle and a number of other organisations. So he now has that, and that's to Transport Scotland, but he has a copy of that. And we expect another meeting to take place within the next week or two. So we'll see where that goes. But it's just to let you know that there's this bit of work that's going on. Yeah, you probably knew anyway.
I was aware of that. I mean, unfortunately, the day that you had that meeting with Mr. Trickett, I was triple booked. So I had Donny McKinnon, the Roads Policing Inspector. Yeah. I think he took part in it.
He did, yeah.
That's great. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Richard and Jamie. Much appreciated. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can we go on to early years provision, delivery and expansion? And I think Derek Martin is here. Will give us a verbal report. Hello, Derek.
Hello, good afternoon, members, and thanks, Chair, for this. We have Hayley Cameron, who is my early level commissioner here today, and she's been working very hard to ensure that 1140 hours for early learning and childcare is in place. My thanks really go to her, and also to various others such as the estates team for doing much of the building works, catering and cleaning and so on. I think Hayley has some detail on this for Black Isle, Dingwall and Seaforth. So with your permission, Chair, I'll ask Hayley to give a detailed update.
Okay, thanks, Derek. Yeah, we're in a really good position in the mid area in terms of ELC expansion. Lots of our sightings across the area are already delivering the enhanced hours. And after the Easter holidays, we have taken another 3 sightings on board. So that's Malbuie, Och and St Clements, all delivering 1140 as well. So that leaves us with only 2 sightings across the entire area, Ben Wyvis and also North Keswick, where there are further building works to take place. So we have until August 2021 to deliver 1140, and we are on target for those 2 sightings. So they will be delivering 1140 by August. I think works are going really well at North Keswick, and the new demountable unit is in place. It's increasing their capacity by over double what they can currently cope with. And at Ben Wyvis, the building works are slightly delayed. We know that we're going to have the building probably towards the end of the year, but we're okay within the existing accommodation from August to deliver 1140, and from January we should have our new building registered with the Care Inspectorate and ready to deliver. But as I said previously, we're in a really strong position across the area. I think we're ahead of any of the other areas, which is a bonus for mid, with having only 2 to go. So yeah, it's positive. But if anybody wants to ask me anything specific about any sighting within the ward, I'm happy to answer that.
Many thanks, Hayley. That all sounds very positive. Are there any questions?
Hayley, I wonder if you could update members, please, on the state of play at Och. We have it implemented, but we do have a risk there as well.
Yeah, of course. So Och are delivering 1140 the Sea Scout Hall, which is just next door to the school, because we're currently building an extension to their existing nursery, which has encountered some delays. So we are behind with the build there. We had hoped that the handover would happen over the summer holidays and we would be able to use the new building from August, but unfortunately we are aware that there are delays, and it's looking, I don't know, we don't have a precise date yet, but maybe September, October time before we are able to use that build, which has a knock-on effect that we're working with the Sea Scouts at the moment in the hope that we can lease the building as we move forward from August, so that we are still delivering the service.
Is this to do with the associated the building works opposite, and there's been, I know, a certain amount of concern because of knock-on effects of the housing scheme that's being built on the other side of the road. Is this delayed in any way associated with that, Hayley?
No, it's not. They've actually, when the site investigations happened at Och, there was issues with Scottish Water, etc. So we've had to have them involved, which was a bit of a, I don't know, laborious task and caused a bit of a delay. And work should have started in January on site, but we're only just at the point where works are happening now because of the problems that we had encountered. So yeah, we are behind with that project, but I know that the contractor are doing all that they can to try and catch up.
It's a tricky site, I know. Yeah, it's very damp.
It's a small site as well for what we're planning. So yeah.
I think, members, the greatest concern at Och at the moment is the traffic flow situation. And it is likely that we will need to work with the parent council and so on through the head teacher to help manage expectations around it. The car park area, for example, is laden with rubble to be removed, and as you know, car parking in Och itself is challenging at the best of times. There's not much we can do about it other than reassure parents, of course, that things are moving as fast as they can.
Thank you very much. Derek, Margaret.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, it's not a question, it's just to say thank you to Hayley. It's not often that we get such an upbeat message, so thank you very much.
Well, there you are. That's not even a question, it's a compliment. Right. Thank you both very much indeed. Keep up the good work and keep us in touch with Och. I know it's a tricky situation one way or another there. Let us know if you come across any difficulties. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aileen.
And Clement is next. And again, I think it's Derek. Is that right? No, it's not. It's
I think it's a double act with myself
Robert.
and Robert. And
Right.
maybe best to start with Robert, I suspect, to give an update.
Yes. Could we, if you tell us what the latest state of play is, Robert? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, I can certainly cover the site investigations that we're undertaking at the moment, which we've obviously been working closely with the ward members and parents in recent weeks and months. And it was agreed that we would look at a site in Ferry Road in Dingwall in a bit more detail. So some investigations were undertaken there just after the Easter holidays. We're getting some feedback now, and we're expecting an interim report on these investigations towards the end of April, and then a full report sometime in June. The investigations really are in response to what we know are the challenges of developing the Ferry Road site. We got some pre-planning application advice from planning last year, and they highlighted that subject to addressing concerns with potential flooding, road access, that it would be a suitable site for development. However, we need to look at these constraints in more detail. There are significant constraints, and it is quite a lengthy exercise to look at all the various issues, and the engineers we've appointed have had some discussion with the flood team. Also speaking to colleagues at roads, and we've had discussions with colleagues in planning as well. So it's quite significant works to overcome. I think one, we need to determine, is it feasible to develop that site full stop, which we're looking at the moment. And then if it is feasible to develop it, how much would it cost to develop it? So obviously raising the ground levels to overcome the flood issues, trying to find a suitable road access, whether it's directly into Ferry Road or by taking a connection in further down Ferry Road and around the houses, around the back of the houses. So that's work in progress. We're certainly moving forward with that at the moment. And as I say, we'll get an interim report by the end of this month, so we can update the ward members then. And I think there is a commitment as well to go back and meet with the parents again. It'll probably be into May before we get that meeting arranged, but we'll certainly keep them informed as soon as we've got something to tell. So I think that's all I've got really at the moment on the ground investigations and the site appraisals that we're doing. I don't know if Derek wants to come at this point, or maybe even take some questions on that for now.
Derek?
Yeah, so alongside the estates works, we've had a number of visits, and of course local members are aware of the detail on this, but for the wider committee, we've had significant engagement with members and the community, and are committed to continuing with that. And those visits have included the Executive Chief Officer and the Chief Executive as well. We have been speaking with the children of the school who are expressing their views about what would make a good school, not in terms of the bricks and mortar, but rather about what they would aspire to in terms of learning and teaching. They've also reflected on the current setup, and they have been very measured but very honest about the inadequacies of the current building, which does stretch back to an HMI report in 2014, which indicated the same. We do have Kenny Murray, who's working with estates on a seconded basis, who will continue to develop a relationship with the parents and with the school to support that as well.
Thank you, Derek. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, thank you very much, Robert. And I know that you can't say an awful lot at the moment because all the members haven't been given an update, and we look forward to getting that, and hopefully it's positive. but if it's not positive, are we in the position to look at another site, which I've suggested to you? And I also need to ask you a question, because someone said it to me and I can't remember who, that the railway might object because it's their bridge. And I wondered if you'd ever heard of that, because I'm sorry, it's the first time I heard of it, because I can't understand why they could object. But I think it's something worth looking into in case it is, because I recall that when we were contemplating the entrance to Dingwall Academy, that the railway started putting in an objection because it was close to the railway. And I wonder, was it because of that? And I think it's things that you don't think about at the time, and maybe it's better to be forearmed, because you know, this people have waited a long time to get this new school, and the children, parents, teachers, counsellors, and it's a very exciting time for us, you know, and the worst thing would be if they get disappointed again, because there's been disappointment and disappointment and disappointment, and you know, yeah, just hope and pray that we find something. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Angela, I'll take your question as well, and perhaps you could answer them both together, Robert.
Okay,
Angela.
no, thank you, Robert and Derek, for the update. And I think that Derek and his team have been doing a really good job working with the children and finding out exactly what they want from the school as well as the staff. I think that we made a commitment some months ago that we would keep this as high profile as we possibly can, because as Derek mentioned, the HMI report from 7 years ago had said this school was not in any good condition. And although we have over the years managed to make some improvements, it's still not suitable for the pupils of St Clement's. And I think that we're looking at this site. This may not be the site, but it may be the site. But we have to keep looking, as Margaret has said, because the children need a new school that is suitable for all their needs. And I think that is the important thing, to keep not just the residents down in Ferry Road, because this would be a kind of bolt out of the blue for them, but also the parents, children and staff updated exactly what progress we're making. Thank you. And thanks, Robert, because I know it's been difficult as well for you and your team.
Thank you. Robert.
Thank you. Yes, just coming back to Councillor Patterson's questions. The other sites that she referred to, I think they could be even more problematic with regard to flooding. It's further into the sort of floodplain, and I think there's a colour coding on the SEPA map. I think the colours for that were even darker than the bit of land we're looking at the moment. Certainly, we've asked about the areas to the east, directly to the east of the site we're currently looking at. To the south of Ferry Road, and the feedback we got there was that yes, we could consider a road access over those areas, but not actually full development of it. So we will get the engineers, they are looking at that as well, so that we'll get some sort of comment back, at least on the areas of land that Councillor Patterson identified. And with regard to the bridge, it's the first I've heard about that particular concern. We can certainly look into that as well as part of this assessment. I'm not quite sure whether the railway is owned by the bridge is owned by Network Rail or not, but I think my understanding is that not adopted road, I think, at the moment. So we can check that with our roads colleagues and get back to you on that.
Thank you both very much indeed, Robert and Derek. If there are no more questions, we'll thank you for coming here and giving us an update. It's a very important and significant project, this, and we look forward to hearing a further update at the next committee. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
The next item is item 6, which is the housing performance report, and I think Jim Holden is here. Jim.
Councillor, thank you very much. Members, good afternoon. Thank you for indulging me in I think what will be one of my last housing performance report presentations. This is our housing performance report from 1st April last year to 31st December, just past. Unfortunately, because this meeting has been slightly delayed, we've missed the kind of year-end situation, but it gives you the idea of how well we've been doing. Fairly positive report throughout. Couple of issues to bring to mind. Clearly, we're still quite strongly affected by COVID. As of today, we've freed up quite a bit of our staff to start to resume some activities, obviously appropriately risk assessed and taking appropriate precautions until we're down the grade of being allowed to move out and about by the Scottish Government. But looking at the table in front of you, particularly in terms of repairs, progress in Dingwall and Seaforth for emergency repairs is fine. Slightly the wrong direction in relation to Black Isle. These are things that sort of come and go, and I've spoken to Colin Sharp and he's reassuring me that he will get that back on track, so I'm trusting him on that. Non-emergency repairs, the trend is in the right direction, still impacted by COVID-19, but I think the team have been working very well throughout that period, so we're not too concerned about that particular performance. Relet times, not quite such a good picture, I'm afraid, particularly in the Black Isle. I think it's fair to say that because of the small number of houses in the Black Isle, we only need one or two where we've got perhaps major repairs to be done. It gives us this sort of bad trend direction. So my team are keeping a close eye on that, and Colin and his repairs team are also working closely. So hopefully we'll be able to retrieve that position, but it's a way off benchmark, so we're not really very comfortable with it, and we do need to do more work on that. In terms of rent arrears, a better picture, and this is one of the weird anomalies of COVID, because our guys have all been sitting at home, not able to get out and do estate management duties and deal with some of the antisocial behaviour that Jeremy Wilson was mentioning earlier on. They've been sitting at home chasing the arrears hard, so the net effect is that we've got pretty good arrears performance. In fact, I can give you a bit of a spoiler alert for the next committee, which will be a report showing that the end of the year, the outturn was better than it was in 1920. So I think it's very much a tribute to the work the team have been doing. But as always, it's an issue of priorities. If you can focus on repairs, then something else goes by the board. And so from today onwards, the focus has shifted a wee bit to make sure that the officers are out and about in the estates, dealing with some of the backlog of concerns about antisocial behaviour, state management issues and the like. So we're gradually gearing back up to do that. Homelessness, it's one of these strange things, homelessness. I think professionally we'd expected homelessness to have increased dramatically. In practice it hasn't. I put that down to two reasons really. First is that we've not necessarily seen the full economic impact of COVID, the lockdown, and that may yet be still to come. The other one is that we've got a great team working out of Dingwall, and they do very good work trying to early intervention, trying to prevent homelessness, getting people permanent outcomes without going down the homeless route at all. Even if they initially present as homeless, we can get them accommodated pretty quickly in a permanent outcome sometimes. So definitely a tribute to their hard work, but I wouldn't want you to feel that we won't be reporting worse figures in the next quarter or the quarter after that, but it's at the moment the figures are looking pretty good. In terms of item 9, the HRA capital programme, there will be a report to the August committee. I think the intention had been to give you a paper at this meeting, but unfortunately the deadline was missed. So if Chair, if you or your colleagues want a report at the Ward Business meeting, I'm sure Jonathan Henderson will be happy to come along and give you an update if you would like that. Finally, members, if you would, there was discussion at the Ward Business meeting in February about garages, and you were kind enough to agree, in principle at least, a 2% rent increase. It would be very helpful if today, formally at this meeting, you could agree that 2% rent increase. That makes sure it's ducks in a row and everyone's doing the right thing. So that's my report. Very happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Jim. Yeah, thanks also for your explanation about the average relet time on the Black Isle. The figure does kind of jump up out at you, but if it's a statistical quirk really because of the low number of units, then that's quite understandable. Something to keep our eye open on. Right, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I first start by saying thank you, Jim, for all the work you've done over the years. You did say this was your last report. Well, very sad to hear that. Very sad to hear that, Jim. But thank you very much for all your years of work and helpfulness. And also, could you pass on a very grateful thanks to the amazing staff, because they are helpful, courteous, and more important, they're caring. I've had people phone me up to say, how kind they were. And at this moment in time, that's one of the most important things. So pass on my grateful thanks on behalf of quite a number of people. The only thing that I wanted to ask about was the rent, and I don't think that it's a lot. I think people are very grateful for their garages, but I just wondered, have we still got quite a high number of garages that are in poor condition? Because I know there are people that keep phoning up and saying, oh, I could do with a garage, and I know that there's not a lot we can do at this moment in time, but I because 326 garages is quite a large amount. I didn't realise that between the two wards, that's how many. So that's my only question, and once again, thank you.
Councillor Patterson, thank you for your kind words, much appreciated. There will be some very able people following me, so I'm hopeful we'll have a continuity of service. I think the important thing to say is, and I will certainly pass on your kind words to the team, they have been working very hard. I've been enormously fortunate in having such a great team working with me, and I really don't think that I've done much other than report their good work. So thank you for those kind words. Garage is an interesting one, and I suspect that Mark might want to dive in here, but we've discussed this previously, and I can just give you a little update on how we're doing. Yes, you're right. It's an unsweated asset, I think, is how we look at it. And in order to try and improve that, I'm working on a wee project with my colleague Chloe on the garages in Cluny Road. And I was actually down there last week having a look around. You're absolutely right. Some of them are in pretty poor condition. And inevitably, we discovered a whole range of issues which we didn't know about, land ownership issues, adjacent proprietors, owner-occupiers next door, all kinds of stuff that a bit of a can of worms. But I think the only way we can learn how to get this problem solved is to tackle a real live case, and that's what we're doing with 10 garages in Cluny Road. So we're getting prices for upgrading and improving new roofs, painting, maybe even some power in them and so on, as a sort of pilot project. And once we've got all those figures together, which I should hopefully have this week, we'll probably do a brief to the ward business meeting, just telling you how we're getting on, whether that gives us an example of something that we can replicate elsewhere. Because I think what we want to do is to work investment of what will be a fairly significant amount in the garage estate would result in those garages becoming more lettable and hence generating an income for the HRA. But we really need to test it, because there are alternatives, including demolition, increase of parking and so on. But until we've got a refurbishment option costed, it wouldn't be, we're not in the best position to give you the options that you need as members to help us make that decision. So we'll come back to you pretty soon. If it's not me, then it will be somebody else who'll come and talk to you about it, but we will get back to you.
Thanks, Jim. Angela, did you have the same point?
Yes, Chair, some of it is the same point. Is that okay?
Well, fine, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I too would like to wish you well, Jim. I think that over the years, you've been there have been times when we've been quite forthright with each other, but I think that we both respect each other, and I would rather somebody was honest with me than tell me something that isn't going to happen. And so I think that you will be missed. I didn't realise this was your last meeting, and you do have a really good staff. Every one of them, it doesn't matter when you contact them, they're so helpful and really care and are passionate about the job that they're doing. And I think over this last year with COVID-19, it shows you what, how much they do care, and especially contacting some of our most vulnerable tenants. But I wouldn't like you to think just because it's your last meeting, I'm going to go easy on you, Jim. So my questions are really on page 12 at the bottom, where you talk about the emergency repairs and non-emergency repairs. Are you finding as more houses are being built and you have more houses, like you're saying here that through Dingwall and Seaforth and the Black Isle, there's over 1,200-1,300 houses. Are they the more they increase in number, is that putting any strain on the staff and the ability to do that, because you've got less staff but you've got more houses? On the 5.8, unable to gain access to properties, I've asked this question before because it seems a waste of time if you're going out and there's nobody in. Is there no modern way through technology that you can arrange? I mean, I can track my parcel, not that I do, but my husband does, from overseas all the way to his door. I can know exactly when it's coming, and I'm the one that usually has to stay in to collect it. But how can we not be more efficient and more use more technology in order to make sure that we have access to the property when it's required? The impact of COVID on void relets, I think I did ask this last time as well, but I can't remember. When it's to do with COVID, because you've got to leave the property empty for a bit longer, can we not claim money from COVID funding that the Scottish Government have given to Highland Council to cover that period, so that it doesn't count as a void, so the council isn't losing out on that rent as well? You talk about the arrears, the current rent arrears at 7.2. Is it the same number of people? Is it, for instance, the same clients, or is there been an increase because of COVID? Because I think in the last report you said more people due to COVID are now having to claim for benefits, and it would just be interesting to know, is it a set number? If it's the same number, how, if they have been outstanding for months, or is it add more people rather than just the amount that's owed? And at 8.2, homelessness, do you think there will be an increase in because of repossessions once the embargo has been lifted, or the moratorium, that the council will have an influx of people that have been, their houses have been repossessed, that the council will then have to house? And garages, yes, I had a big thing. I even thought about putting forward a motion today, but I thought, no, I'll leave it. Because as Margaret says, we do get contacted. I've been stopped in the last 2 weeks by 3 different people about either the state of the garage, the increase that was agreed at council, so we have to agree anyway, and also still looking for garages. And it would be really useful going forward if we knew, and I know you say 326 on 8 garage sites between the 2 wards, but I can think of 9 in my ward that are garage sites that the council own. So perhaps it's the name. So I would like to know where where these garage sites are, and also how many are occupied, how much income are we losing because of they're not occupied. And I know when I asked this, and how many people are waiting on the list for garages, and what the conditions are. And I think you've kind of touched on that with Margaret's question, Jim, that you are looking in Clooney Road. There are some that have in really bad state of repair, and others that have been repaired. But some people have complained to me that given that the state of their garage, and they've even written a letter of complaints to council, that why should they pay any more for it when the garage is not being repaired? So that would be useful, because I do think that I know Mark has said before, do you want to concentrate on garages? But yeah, if you look after the pennies, the pounds take care of themselves. So I would like either we knock the garages down if they're not suitable, or we are renting them out and getting some income in here. So thank you. And good luck with your retirement, Jim.
Mark, do you want to pick that up, or should I go to Jim first?
I'll maybe just pick up a couple of points that Angela said and give Jim a chance to collect his thoughts, so he can pick up on the rest. I think Angela made a really good point right at the end there. I completely agree with. You know, it's decision time: blow them up or do them up properly. I think it comes down to as basic as that. And I think what Jim said in the early part of his response is definitely worth looking at. So let's go out there and do the trial along the lines he said, and see if that actually makes any difference to the relative attractiveness and their ability to generate an income. It's probably just worth pointing out at this time that one of the pieces of work that I'm about to commence, which will have some impact potentially on this area, is a similar process to that which we've been taking through Housing and Property Committee in relation to the 1,200 non-housing buildings that we've got responsibility for. So if you remember, that was talking about looking at the whole 30-year investment cycle for all of our buildings and trying to prioritise which buildings it made sense to invest in, which buildings you should disinvest in, etc., in terms of identifying key stock, or core stock, if you like, there. And a similar process can be undertaken in relation to the housing revenue account stock. In fact, it's a piece of work that I did in the last local authority that I was at, and I'm quite happy to share the details of that offline with those that are interested in the detail of that. But what that does look at, amongst other things, is it takes the HRA as a whole and all of the activities on it, whether that's housing or whether that's commercial or whether it's garages, and it asks itself the question, what does it make, amongst other things, economic sense to do here? So although it's not all about the money, you can't score something necessarily 100% solely based around its cash value. There's a whole dimension about social value and the use of buildings and the importance of buildings to factor into that. Nonetheless, it's worth saying as a starting point, if something isn't washing its face, you've at least got a question to ask yourself here about, okay, well then, is it justified to subsidise that activity by income generated from elsewhere because you believe the social value of that is worthwhile or not? And having done that exercise in a local authority with about 22,000 properties, you do find that the majority of them, generally speaking, work reasonably well and have decent prospects for the future. But it does throw up some anomalies where you need to make a decision about, do you invest or do you disinvest? And garages is quite often one of those, and you may find that the picture is different between the two wards, for example, or even potentially within the wards, and it will certainly be different across the Highlands. But I think Jim's is a really good piece of work to actually have a look at that. Well, here's one option that we could do, and if we do it in this particular way, does that make a difference? And then we can do the financial and other analysis around the backside of that as we look across the whole of the Highland Council stocks. That will take a couple of years to work its way through, and then we will have that sort of detailed oversight about what the 30-year investment requirements of the housing revenue account are across the whole of all of the stock, and then we can start to break that down into individual bite-sized chunks. What does that mean for Black Isle, Dingwall and Seaforth, for example? And certainly, from having done that process before, one of the key consultees in that is local members. So we wouldn't just be necessarily saying, let's go and have a chat through Housing and Property Committee, because obviously garages are involved, and I know that there are local members that take a very strong interest in this, including yourself, Angela. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of this sort of top line strategic picture on that. But I like the comment you said, just like make your mind up, either blow them up or fix them up, or just whatever it is, right? But crack on. And so hopefully between what I've just said there and what Jim is about to say, then that will give you some comfort on that front. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Final word to you, Jim.
Well, thank you. That's set me up for a comment on it. But just to say that, I think the general point is that garages have not had a strong historical investment, and therefore we're ripping that particular whirlwind, if you like, of difficult to let and in poor condition, etc., and potentially a fairly large investment required. I think we need to quantify that, which is what we're trying to do with the pilot. If the decision was taken to invest at some kind of level over a period, potentially we could double the income that garages are currently providing. But I think that's a potential which really needs to be tested by practical examples. So we'll work on that one. You asked a number of other questions. The one about, well, we've got more houses, and is that meaning we've not got enough staff to do the repairs? I think I'd be having serious words with my colleagues in housing investment if we had new houses that required lots of repairs in at least the first 10 years. But yes, reasonably, there will be bits and pieces that go wrong that need to be fixed. At this point, it's not a significant issue for us, the increase in the number of houses. The idea about using improved technology to get us better access to properties, it's something we're looking at all the time. Brian Cameron leads on this from the policy side, and he's been doing quite a lot of work on that, along with Noel McLaughlin, who sort of leads for us on tech. So I think we've got some strong ambitions for the service as a whole to improve our use of IT. New modules for our Northgate housing system, for example, are being looked at. A lot of self-service by tenants going forward, and that's going to be factored into the restructuring that we're currently contemplating for the service. So I think there's some bright futures coming in that direction, which will make better use of technology and hence better use of our skilled staff time. You asked about whether we could steal some money from the COVID-19 fund to cover the sort of longer period. I think generally speaking, the impact isn't that significant. It's more about whether we have availability of tradesmen and external contractors who've put staff on furlough and things like that. That's added to the delay in relation to that. Have we seen an increase in real arrears or COVID-related arrears? I think we initially thought we would. Analysis hasn't shown that to be the case. Most of the arrears are still around people who've had arrears before COVID came along. More people signing on to universal credit and so on because they've lost their jobs after being furloughed or whatever. But I still think we've got on a bit of a delay. We haven't really seen the full impact yet. And if they're very hard to read the runes, if the economy is going to bounce back as the politicians would hope, national politicians, I should say, then maybe it won't be such a big impact. But if there is an economic decline, I think we will see arrears in that regard. You also talked about whether we would expect to see more homelessness as a result of repossessions in the private sector, perhaps. We don't know is a straight answer to that. All I can say is that my team will do their very best to help people. We should be getting the appropriate notifications from mortgage lenders and the like if they are proposing to evict people. And we've got a strong process in place there. Not to say it won't put a strain on temporary accommodation, and some people will find themselves in difficult situations, but we will do our very best to help as always. I'm taking the view that Mark's intervention in relation to garages picked up most of your points, Councillor McLean. I hope so, but I see you got your hand up again, so maybe there was an additional query that you had.
My only query, Jim, is that I have never asked anyone to steal anything. Stealing is a sin, one of the 10 commandments. So I wouldn't want the front page of the local press. Councillor McLean tells people to steal. That's okay. My understanding is that if there is a delay on anything due to COVID, if it takes longer to do something, that then the Scottish Government funded would cover some of that. So that's the reason I'm asking. So yeah, that's okay. But I've got at least 11 different locations in my ward that I can think of for garage sites. So I don't think 8 for Black Highland can be right. Thank you.
We'll certainly get that information checked, and it was very much my wrong use of the word steal. I think the point I was trying to make was that if we claim from the COVID fund, there's a sort of bureaucracy involved in that, and if it's only a sort of 72-hour period, it's really not that significant in the scheme of things. So I think we've probably taken the view that it's not quite worth the effort for the service as a whole anyway. So I hope that's satisfactory, and apologies again for the use of the word.
Well, Jim, that's a high note to mark your departure. I'd just like to add my thanks as committee chair to my colleagues for your sterling work over the years. I've only been a councillor for 4 years, and on the very few occasions when I've had cause to phone you up or to write to you, you've always responded very quickly and very effectively. So thank you for that. And the very best to you in the future.
Thank you.
Can I ask members then to agree that they've considered this information and approve the garage rent increase at 2%? Do we agree?
What happens if we don't? Because it's already been agreed by council.
Well, I think probably this is a formality, as they say.
Yes, agreed.
Chair. Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you again, Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, next item, common good funds. Right, we've got reports on Cromarty, Fortrose and Rosemarkie and Dingwall. In addition, we are asked to set the project expenditure budget of £55,000 towards the town centre funded. Now, all of this, I think, has been discussed in ward business meetings. Are people happy to okay all of this right now, or do you have any questions about it?
I'm happy to.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. And we'll go to the item number 8, the Highland Coastal Communities Fund. Right, there are two things here. We have to agree on whether or not the area allocation is to be administered as one budget or two, split by ward. And we need to consider each of the applications, whether they should be accepted, deferred, or rejected. Again, this has been discussed at ward level meetings, and my recollection is that we agreed the allocation should be split by ward. I think everyone agrees with that. No.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay. Agreed. Fiona, I see, is here. Fiona, I don't know if you wish to speak any further about any of the particular applications, or again, they've been discussed at ward level. And certainly as far as the Kalboki one is concerned, I can say that we're very happy with that. Angela, I see, has got her hand up.
I just wanted to, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check on 4.1 on page 35. Is that the wrong way round for 8 and 9, given that the Maryborough men's shed is for £5,000? It's just that we were Ward 9, but we're now Ward 8. And Fiona.
Yes, well spotted, Angela. Well spotted. I never noticed that. Yes, you're right. You're right. I think it is.
And Fiona did check with the men's shed that this was not covering any other funding, so I think we're happy to agree.
You're happy, right? Okay, fine. So let me just see. Fiona, is there anything that you wish to say with regard to the applications that we're considering?
No thanks, Chair. I think that's all just noting Councillor McLean's point there, and apologies for that muddle. But yes, it is that the Black Isle ward is the application that has the 4,950, sorry, 4,450, and Dingwall and Seaforth is £5,000 for the Maryborough men's shed.
Right, and these are the two that we're considering this occasion. There was a further one which I think has been withdrawn. Is that correct?
No, I don't think there was an actual one that had come to full application. I think possibly at expression of interest stage, there were additional ones that come forward, but these are the only two that progressed to full application.
Right, okay, fine. Are we happy with all of that, members? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Fiona, thank you.
Fiona.
I'm sorry that you haven't had much of a say. I hope you weren't waiting too long, but many thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, now we come to the Area Capital Programme 21-22. And the emphasis here, we've heard a bit about housing, but is on roads maintenance programme. And we're invited to approve the proposed 21-22 roads maintenance programme for the Black Isle, Dingwall and Seaforth. Ian Moncrief is here. Ian, would you like to say, again, this has been discussed at ward level, but is there anything you'd like to say regarding this item, Ian?
Really just to say, to remind councillors that when it first came round, just after Christmas, councillors asked in Ward 8, asked for the allocation to be reprioritised to the worst roads in their area, and not, as I had it, as the worst roads in each of the road classes in their area. So I've taken the same data and I've simply prioritised it in terms of the worst roads in Ward 8 and applied that list to what I can afford under the baseline capital and also the additional £10 million share. There was no change to Ward 9.
Right, thank you very much indeed.
I think that's it.
Thank you. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just double check, Ian? You've got the resurface dressing on Station Road, Ward 8, the A862. Is that the road that failed?
Yes.
Are you charging us for that again, or is that what you're doing?
Yes. It was there was a surface dressing, and there was also I had reprioritised the overlays. But there was a surface dressing which I noticed that some of the councillors had previously asked for, and the surface dressing in, where was it now? Sorry. The other surfacing, if I can find it, Riverford Crescent and Drive, that was previously on the last programme, and I believe that had been accepted. So it hasn't been done, so I put it on this programme for completeness sake.
And my second question was, Distillery Bends, did we not discuss the Distillery Bends in Muir Ward? No. Is that, am I missing that here? Sorry.
Yeah, we took it off because I believe I'd made a mistake and the section at the distillery had been patched. If I'm correct. Sorry, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing here, Councillor McLean.
I think that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, yeah. So is this all we're getting done at the moment, the surface dressing programme in our ward, in Ward 8?
Yes, that's all I can afford using my baseline capital and my additional share of that £10 million. But there's still the councillor's discretionary budget of 100k to be decided.
Yes.
And I also have heard that there's a discussion taking place about spending some of the unspent council reserves on roads. But that hasn't been included because it hasn't been confirmed yet.
Yeah. So can I ask, how soon will you be starting on the Station Road one? Don't want it to be when we get a hot summer.
I think, to be honest, it's probably going to be, we usually get the surface dressing kit around the end of June, the beginning of July. There's 3 trains. It's got to go Lochaber, Skye and us. The exact date still has to be confirmed. I think the critical thing with the programme, maybe not so much with the surface dressing, but with the programme in whole, is that there's quite a bit of work across the whole of Ross and Cromarty, and we need to stay with that programme.
And when you say Station Road, I presume that's right out to the Mart.
It was the section which had failed, I think, from the traffic lights to, was it past Pitglassy Road
Yeah, to the Mart.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it did go to the Mart. Yes.
Yeah, it did go to the Mart and get the and I hope this time it will be a great success, and thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Chair. The distillery bins, I think it is something different. The distillery bins are required. There's huge holes on them there, and they're actually dangerous when you're coming in from the Maryborough end, especially when you're coming into a left-hand bend. There's red paint on the road. There is actually holes there, and I know somebody who very nearly had a collision there this weekend, so that definitely has to be attended to. Station Road must go right back to the Mart, because that's the section that was done from the Mart straight back in that field. Other than that, I don't really have much comment to make.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Master. Ian.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly now, the distillery bends were taken off the programme because you wanted the programme reordered for the worst roads, irregardless of the road class, to be done first. So Station Road dropped down. We can, however, either include that as one of the councillors' discretionary schemes, or alternatively, we could, if you want, remove something else from the programme.
So you've got the option of either the discretionary scheme or possibly some of the additional funds being made available by full council, which could also be used to mend that particular bit of road. When is it likely that you're going to be able to get this word on this extra funding, Ian? Do you know?
No, I don't. I don't know, although there's been quite a bit of talk about it being released. I don't know, Mark, if you might have any other information on that, but
not in terms of the timing, sadly, Ian. Certainly not right at this instant, but otherwise the process is as you've described it, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah. Perhaps what we could do, I mean, in terms of the programme, we're sort of working on programmes for all three of my areas at present. There is quite a bit of work going on. We can't afford to sit back and let schemes be deferred or put on hold. We need to work this almost as a factory production line. So each week I intend to hold a meeting with my road officers. Schemes that are falling behind, they will have to come up with a solution. If they can't find a solution, it's going out to contractor. We can't afford to be sitting thinking about how we're going to fix the problem come the end of September. Having said that, it could be, if the councils were minded, we could put the A832 distillery bends in a scheme just now, and one of the other schemes could drop out, and if there's any extra funding, then we could look at that at a later date.
Is that a decision that you want to make now, Ward 8 members, or you can discuss that at a later date? Okay.
I would rather discuss that at a later date.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
I think I don't want to prejudge your views, but the next committee is going to be at the end of summer. There's only 23 weeks before we stop operations and switch to winter. So I am under time constraints here.
Is this a decision that could be made by the ward business meeting?
I think it's got to be agreed at an area committee. Hasn't it? It's got to be.
I think this is in the public domain, Chair. You know, to start now, you know, taking it away and giving it to another area, I don't know if that is the right thing to do. I think we can, you know, try and sort out the distillery. I know it's bad, but which one were you going to take it off, Alistair?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I think it's a bit complex. I think there is a decision. It has been, you've discussed it in the ward. I think we have to stick with the decision that we have at this time. And if there's extra funding, then the distillery bends can come first in the list. That would be my thinking. Mark, do you have any thoughts on that?
It's really just a quick observation. I think that the biggest challenge for Ian is more around the sort of timing of when the next committee is. So yes, I agree. Hopefully we'll get clarity on any additional funding relatively quickly. But I was just going to make a suggestion that it would appear competent for you to have a special meeting of the committee just to deal with one item that has happened in other area committees. In fact, it's happened in Taine Easter Ross, which is my other one. I would recommend that. I don't want Ian sweating and thinking, oh my God, I've got 1 week to do 6 weeks worth of work, so something like that would be a bit crazy. So if we could try and sort out some timing around clarity on funding, but it also gives sufficient time for any discussion and decision to be taken, it then gives them a fighting chance of being able to deliver anything, that would be really useful.
Would it be possible on a procedural basis if we include the A832 distillery now, subject to additional funding? I'm pretty likely
that makes
additional
sense.
funding.
Ian?
You could.
But that would mean that I think it's highly likely we are going to get the additional funding, and if we but that means I don't have to wait for another committee.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is one. Yeah. Yes. That would suit me. The other thing, Ian, is that when you're doing the station road, because we've got the red surfacing for the cycle routes, and I know I had got agreement that we could get that bit done. It was just so that rather than having to come back to it again, because you've got the bit at Green Hill, because it's all part of the cycle route as you come into Dingwall, and it's well used. So perhaps, I think I passed on that email. When you're going to do that work, you could put down the red surfacing too, if you get the funding from HQ. So I'll send you the email again.
That'd be great. Thank you. Thanks.
And you could get it all done at once and upgrade it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Margaret.
Add to what Angela's saying about the cycle path, because I've had complaints that they're not sticking to the cycle path and they're on the opposite side of the road, which is quite dangerous. And who puts up the signs? We need someone to put up. We need better signage for the cycling route, because we need people to try and adhere to it's there for their safety and the safety of other people that's maybe walking on the pavements or pushing a pram. But someone said to me, well, it's not that well signed. And I tried to have a look, and I thought, if I was cycling, would I know where to cycle? So maybe we need to have another look at the signage.
Well, personally, Margaret, I have to say I always cycle on the other side of the road, parallel to the road. I find it a great deal more convenient. The actual cycle path is pretty up and down and not at all convenient. I've never met anyone on that bit of pavement. I think it could easily be designated as a cycle path, and quite a number of cyclists do tend to use it. I think it's one of these things where the width of the pavement overtook the utility of the designated cycle path, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, I mean, I take your point. Right, Ian or Mark, did you want something else to say?
It's a really quick point. It would be perfectly okay to approve in principle that additional work to be done subject to funding being received, so long as once funds are confirmed, that we just email around to the members to confirm that that money has been received and that the works will proceed. And then when we come to the next committee, we should be able to simply just effectively note that and homologate the decision.
Thank you for that clarity. Thank you very much indeed. Ian, just to say that certainly from the point of view of my ward, Black Isle, just to thank you and your team for all you've done. I know you're under all sorts of constraints, not least money, but a lot of the really tricky areas are being dealt with. And I know sometimes people have to wait a bit, but they all eventually are dealt with. And we do appreciate that. We really do. And I know members of the public do as well, even though there are no end of people reporting potholes and so on. And I think it's great that we've got these extra resources. Hopefully we'll be able to get this stuff done more quickly. And I note that you say that it is likely not to be before July, before the big bits of work can be done because of the equipment. So we can't really expect any of the work which you mentioned in this report to really begin before then. Is that correct, or have I got that wrong? I'm thinking of the surface dressing and the resurfacing.
It's surface dressing forms part of our programme.
Yes.
But it's not forming all the programme. I also note that we've still got the members' discretionary budget.
Yes.
The schemes for that for both wards. I've already obtained prices from Patman Rose, the contractor, to undertake works at Och for Trowes, Ness Road, and that's really waiting for the sort of go-ahead from yourselves with an approved list of schemes. In terms of sort of Ward 8, we've just started to look at the programme for that. Again, we have to make a decision on what schemes are going straight out to contractors, what we are going to do ourselves, and what schemes we may do at a later date. We have a quarry products tender in place, which means that the only constraints are on using contractors are to get them to agree to book a slot for us. They're under pressure from other areas, from other clients, and I really need to sort of finalise these the ward discretionary budget schemes so that I can start putting work out to contractors as soon as I can.
And that can be done at ward level, presumably, Ian, can it?
I think it has to be approved at committee.
Right.
Yeah.
In which case, what suggestion earlier on?
Scheme of delegation, you see.
Well, okay. Di, I'm not sure if you're on the call.
Yeah, we could arrange a special meeting. We can arrange a special area committee meeting. There might be other business anyway to consider. We can certainly arrange another meeting.
I think we'd better, because of the Ward 9 stuff's all been discussed and pretty much agreed, I think. That's my recollection. Ward 8 is yet to be agreed. But as soon as Ward 8 is agreed, then maybe we should organise a special meeting so we can sign that off.
Councillor Adam, if Ward 9 is agreed, could the committee approve that just now?
I would have thought so. Just remind us what there was. You said it was Ness Road.
There was Och High Street,
yes.
For Trowes High Street,
yes.
Ness Road. There
yes.
was Brayhead. There was the top of the Denny.
Yeah, I know the list. Yeah,
yes.
I know the list.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine by me. Jennifer Barclay,
yes.
Councillor Buckley, would you agree to sign that off at this stage?
I certainly would, as we've got to stop now when we're going up Ness Road to drive on the other side of the road, because it's that bad on the other one side. So
okay.
As soon as possible would be great.
And Di, just keep me right here, but I'm pretty sure that we had a consensus at the ward business meeting on these on these bits of work.
Yeah, there was a complete consensus at the business meeting.
Right. Okay. So let's go ahead with that, Ian.
That's great. Thank you.
And as for Ward 8 and anything else, we can have a quick special meeting in order to sort that out as and when.
That's
Angela,
great. Thanks.
Angela, do you? Yeah, no, you nothing. Okay.
Yeah, yes. I was just going to say, I think we're using the recycling of the road surface. Is that the council that does that, Ian, not the contractor?
That's probably going to be a contractor that we'll sort of pull in. what I need to do is I need to speak to Laura, who's on bereavement leave just now. As soon as she comes back, I can start pulling together her programme.
That'd be great, because I know Councillor Patterson and I have been on about a particular road that could be done in this way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. What do we have to do with this? We have to basically approve the proposed 21-22 roads maintenance programme with the addition of the Distillery Road once funds become available. Are we agreed on that?
Agreed.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay.
The final point, members, is minutes. They have been circulated. Are you? They were approved, and they were approved by council. So
yeah, noted.
you note them. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Members, thank you all very much indeed, and officers also. We'll end the meeting there, because there is another meeting starting in about, well, -1 minute, and I think we're going to be.
Yes, just started.
We need to be on that one. Thank you very much indeed.